All right, today we're diving into a really fascinating, kind of provocative idea from our source material. What if you could weaponize time itself?
So what if conquest doesn't need armies anymore? I mean, think about it. What if the usual tools of empire, the tanks, the soldiers, all that open conflict, what if they were just obsolete? That's the question our source material kicks things off with.
And it doesn't stop there. It pushes the idea even further. Like, what if a whole nation could be taken over, but with zero visible signs? The borders are still there. The flags are flying. The government looks exactly the same. Everything we think of as a sovereign nation seems untouched.
And here's the real kicker. Even with all those outward signs of independence, an entire population can be quietly brought under a new, unified system of control. So, the big question is, how? How could that even be possible?
Well, the answer, according to the source we're looking at, isn't about politics or military might. Nope. It's about something we all take for granted, something that quietly runs the show in our lives every single day: time.
So here's the core idea. Real, lasting power, it isn't just about making laws. It's about setting the rhythm, the very pulse that an entire society marches to.
And this concept actually has a name, at least in our source material. They call it temporal control. It's this wild idea that you can control how people behave, not by telling them what to do, but just by controlling when they do it.
And just think about how deep that really goes. I mean, a calendar isn't just for keeping track of your appointments, right? It's basically the operating system for a whole society. It tells you when to work, when to rest, when the markets open and close, when to gather with your family. It literally tells an entire nation when to pause, all together.
This quote from the source really just boils it all down perfectly. To control time is to control behavior. To synchronize time is to synchronize people. It's not simple. If you can get millions of people on the same schedule, you're essentially syncing up their actions, creating this one big unified group.
Okay, so this brings us to a really critical point in the argument. The calendar that you and I use every day, it wasn't some neutral, natural thing that just happened. No, it was a strategic choice. It was a tool of power, and it represented a massive shift in who was in charge.
So let's look at this comparison the source makes. On one side, you've got the Gregorian calendar. It comes from Roman authority, and it was built for one thing, really: the efficiency of empire and commerce. But then you have the biblical calendar, which is completely different. Its whole purpose is centered around worship, sacred events, and these divinely appointed times for rest.
And this is the absolute core of the argument. Switching calendars wasn't just like, software update. The source is saying this was a fundamental transfer of allegiance. You stopped obeying one source of authority and started obeying a totally new one.
Now, this idea gets tied to a really old text from the book of Daniel. The source interprets this as a kind of prophetic blueprint. It talks about a powerful entity whose main goal is, get this, to change times and laws, to actually alter the fabric of how society operates.
So if you follow that line of thinking, the ultimate signature of domination isn't some big conquering army storming the gates. It's the quiet, almost boring power of administration, the power to redefine the most basic structures of our lives. It's conquest by paperwork, almost. So you might be wondering, how does this ancient concept play out in our modern world? Well, the argument is that this method of control is actually more relevant than ever before. Why? Because it's so subtle, it's quiet, and man, is it effective. Our source actually lays out a kind of modern three-step playbook for how this absorption by rhythm works. Step 1, you get two nations to stop working on the same days. Then step 2, they start celebrating the same holidays. The cultural stuff starts to line up. And finally, step 3, their economies fall into sync, and before you know it, they're basically operating as one big economic machine.
And the result of all this is, well, it's pretty profound. There's no treaty. No land is officially taken over. One population just gets absorbed into the rhythm of another one. They start acting like a single entity, all because their calendars, their whole experience of time, have become one.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. The main argument here is that if old-school empires conquered land, the new empires, well, they're conquering time itself. That's the new territory.
And it's interesting, the source even takes this into the spiritual realm. It argues that when the church, for example, adopts a secular, man-made calendar instead of one based on its own sacred texts, it unknowingly becomes part of this bigger synchronization process.
Which brings us to the final, and maybe most chilling, conclusion.
The most effective takeover is the one you never see. It doesn't create resistance because there's no obvious enemy to fight. There's no battlefield, no treaty, absolutely no evidence that a conquest even happened.
The only thing left is the tool of conquest itself, a simple, shared calendar that everyone just accepts as normal, as the way things are.
And that leaves us with this one last powerful quote. And when people share time, they begin to share destiny. Wow, think about that. Sharing a schedule, a rhythm, it's the first step to sharing a future. A shared time creates a shared destiny. It's a kind of unity, a deep one, achieved without a single shot ever being fired. So what do you think? That calendar on your wall, does it hold a lot more power than you ever imagined?